Let's Talk to Animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I'm here with Pearl Cutts, my ever-present, almost 23-year-old feathered sidekick. He never misses an episode. Here on Let's Talk to Animals, we are delighted to welcome some of the most innovative and truly heart-centered animal communicators and pet whisperers and energy healers from all around the world, mentors, teachers, coaches, and guides. Hopefully, when you're listening to these podcasts and you're thinking to yourself, you know, is my pet talking to me? Is it possible for me to talk with animals? Is it possible for me to work with someone who talks with animals so we can build a deeper relationship with our own animals, with our interspecies family? You will find inspiration, you'll find helpful tips, you'll find guidance along the road, and most importantly, you'll find a community of people that you can relate to. Maybe you're listening this morning and you felt like, gosh darn it, I just haven't found my tribe. I don't know where I fit. I feel a little left of center, a little outside the norm. I think the trees are talking to me. You know, I always, I have a special animal or insect or bird signs that come to me when I need help. And I don't really understand what's going on with me. The podcast and the YouTube series, wherever you're watching and listening, that's why we do what we do. And this morning we have Sarah-Jane LeBlanc. So honored, all the way from Fife, or is it Fife? Tell me. Fife? Okay.
Time, yep.
Fife. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. First times are rare for me, so I'm very excited about that. And you are joining us all the way from Fife in Scotland, in the UK, to talk to us about how she got started. And I think you're going to be fascinated, because this is probably not the story you're expecting to hear. How about that? So, and Sarah-Jane is joining us after a brief sabbatical. With all the work that you do, I know you probably need a lot more of a sabbatical. So I'm very grateful to have you with us, with your beautiful fiery red hair and your gorgeous sapphire pendant and your beautiful energy and heart for animals. So let's just start at the beginning. Why don't we? We'll just start with, you know, like I said, I don't, no spoilers here, no spoilers. We're going to get it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. But you have a very unusual path. So could you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to know that talking with animals is even possible?
Okay, so you're absolutely right, Shannon. My story is not the usual run of the mill story. But before I dive into my story, I'd just like to say a big thank you to you for inviting me here to speak. It's such a privilege to be here, so thank you.
Oh, you're so very welcome.
So, if you think back, I don't know what we're at, maybe 20, well, if somebody had said to me, even 20 years ago, and I've been doing this work now for nearly 20 years, just shy of 20 years, but if you'd said to me 20 years ago, and even more so 25 years ago, that this is the job that I would be doing, that I would be showing up in service every day for animals, for their guardians, and not only speaking to animals, but teaching other people how to speak to animals and taking them right up to professional level, I would have thought you needed to be carted off and I didn't even know that animal communication existed. I didn't know it was a thing. But more than that, I had an absolute abject fear of all animals. And I'm talking real deep fear, not just, oh, I'm a bit scared, but fear where even as an adult, I crossed over the road when there was a dog walking to me on the other side. There was a dog coming towards me on the same side of the road, the sidewalk, as you say in the States. And in those days, it was becoming unusual. I don't know what it was like in the States, but when I was a child, dogs would often congregate in packs. People would just let them out without a lead or anything like that. So it wasn't usual to see a dog by themselves, and there was one coming right towards me. And I was absolutely terrified, so scared that I crossed over the road to the other side. And the dog crossed over to the other side as well. And then I started to eye the houses, and I actually had my hand on the gate to a complete random stranger's home. I did not know who they were. I opened the gate, shaking, went to their front door, had my hand on the handle of their front door, and was ready to enter their home if that dog was to jump over the low wall and come. That's how scared I was. It was a terror. Yeah. And my family had always been perplexed by that, because I'd never had an incident where I'd been attacked by a dog. I was especially scared of dogs. So coming from that background, a background where there was a lot of fear around animals, and also, I say this because it was my truth, and I hold no shame with this, because it's where I was at that time, but I appreciate that it might not be what people expect to hear. But at that time, I would say I didn't like animals. So if you were to say to me that I was going to be working with animals, making sustainable, transformational differences in the lives of animals, I would have said, no, the animal communication would have been cuckoo enough for me. But to say that I was actually going to be working with animals with that level of fear, for me, that would have been, no, you're crazy. Like, I don't even like animals. I have to very quickly qualify that statement. That's not where I stand now. And I realised that dislike was actually just coming from a place of fear. So that's my background around animals and animal communication. Started to shift, or when it's not that it started to shift, Shannon, it just shifted. It was like just like a bolt out of nowhere. I was going to bed one night, and I was working, my background's in education. So I was working in a really full-on project, working with disadvantaged teenagers. And it was a really full-on job. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, but it was busy, and it was quite stressful a lot of the time. So I was going to bed at night, reading my book and thinking about work and things that I needed to do for the next day. And so I'm reading my book, as I would always do. And I remember closing my book, putting it at the side of the bed on my bedside table, and I switched off the light. And this is the point in the story where people would say to me, oh, but you must have been sleeping. I was not sleeping. I was preparing for sleep, but I was awake. I was sleepy, but I was awake. And I just cuddled down, pulled the duvet up, closed my eyes, and wham, there was an image of a border collie. And it was a brown and white border collie. And I just saw the image clear as day. And I was not asleep. And I just looked at this image, and I had no idea what it was, what it meant, who this dog was, because there were no dogs in my family or my immediate family. My grandfather had collies. He was a shepherd, so I knew it was a collie. My grandfather was a shepherd. So it was a tan and white collie. So this happened for 2 nights or 3 nights. I can't remember now, but for a couple of nights, this dog just appeared. And I think it was on the 3rd night. And I just kind of said to him, hello. Like, hello. And I was really thinking about how I trained my staff in the projects and different teams that I had that work with young people. I would always say to them, if they said to me, oh, Sarah-Jane, this young person's, kind of approached me a couple of times, and I'm, why are you not engaging? Why are you not establishing a relationship? Obviously, they're looking for something, needing something. You want to step into that space and really hold it for them. So that's the only context that I could put into place. So I thought, right, I need to do what I teach my staff to do with young people. And I just said, hello. And I said, is there something that you need? And I swear, without a word of exaggeration, that dog turned around and said, clear as day, I could hear it, like it was somebody next to me. And he said, duh, took you long enough. And I remember my first saying, oh my gosh, I've got stroppy teenagers all day long, and now I come to bed to go to sleep and I've got a stroppy dog. I have no idea what this is all about. I had no clue. I wasn't even shocked that he'd spoken back to me. It was just that, like, really? Seriously? A response like that? It was more that than I didn't even register the absurdity of an animal talking to me hearing an animal talk. That wasn't even on my radar. So what happened next was just a really, that was nearly 20 years ago, and I'm still getting emotional thinking about it. What happened next was just a really easy, fluid conversation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't ever question what's going on here. Am I losing my mind? I can hear a dog talking. Like, seriously? What the friggin' heck is going on here? None of that was in my mind at all. Just having this flow. Now, it didn't go like a conversation that you and I are having, where you talk, then I talk. I saw the picture initially, then I had heard the words, duh, it took you long enough. And then I got feelings in my body, and I just trusted. So whilst it was the most strangest, surreal thing on one level, on the other level, I just had this deep sense of feeling that it was all okay. So it was a really strange, bizarre thing, like two different things kind of going on, this okayness with it. And also when I'd finished thinking, this is all just a bit strange, like what just happened there? So the long and short of it was, we had this conversation. He sent me some feelings which concerned me. I didn't think he was in the best of health. And I was training in energy work at that time as a means to bringing that into my work with young people and young adults in my paid job. So I was aware of energy work and the chakras. And so where he was drawing me, I could put sense on that from an energetic perspective. And I remember at the end asking him, because I did some healing work, and asking him if he would like to be wrapped in pink. Because pink's the color of love, it represents love, and this was this dog was a very sad dog. That was really very, very clear, and he was grieving. So when I asked him that, he turned around and said, no, pink's way too girly for me, I want yellow. And I realized later that was probably to do with his health issues and the confidence that he needed in his new home. So that's the story of how it started. And if it's helpful, I don't know how we are for time, but I can tie that up if you want me to, and I can leave it just there if you want me to. But I can tell you how I found out who the dog was and what happened next. But that's ultimately.
Well, I think I can feel my own preference. That's a cliffhanger right there. We don't like cliffhanger. We don't do cliffhangers here. We like wrap ups. We like to know how it evolved. So yes, please.
So what happened next was I got up in the morning and I thought, right, this is, well, actually I wrote everything down. And I clocked the time. And I think it was 11:30 at night, if I remember correctly. But I logged the time and I went to bed thinking, what's just happened? But I got up in the morning and I spoke to my husband, or now my ex-husband, but at that time I spoke to my husband and I said to him, look, I've got something to tell you and I want you just to listen, and I don't want you to make any comment, and if you laugh at me, then I will never speak to you about this ever again. So give him his due. He stood very attentively and he had his head cocked to the side and he's and let me say what I needed to say, and I told him what had happened. And I finished and I said, and I don't know what to do. I don't know who this dog is, but he's in a lot of emotional pain and there's some physical stuff going on. And I don't know who he is, where to find him. And I just know that I've got to help him. My husband said to me, he said, Sarah-Jane, please promise me you won't tell anybody what you just told me. And I went, why not? I said, I have to find this dog. And he said, it wasn't that long ago that people got burned at the stake for far less. And I know that that was coming from a place of protection for me, because it was outside his realm of possibility as well. But when he left for work in the morning and took children to school, I stood, I don't know why I was still at home. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I was probably going into work later or something. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I remember he said to me, he came back and said to me, remember, don't say anything to anybody. And I did that whole schoolgirl thing. You do it in the States when you cross your fingers, and it means that you can tell a lie. Or so I did that as an adult. I'm nearly 30 years old, or it would be about 30 years old, and I had my fingers crossed behind my back. I went, no, I won't tell anyone. Then went on the computer, and I wasn't very computer savvy at that time, because the internet was fairly new, and I just typed in, I didn't even know what to type in, talking dogs, and just put a whole random selection of different things in, and a website just beaconed out at me, and it was Amelia Kincaid, who you probably, and it was her website that just was like that light saying that's one I have to look at. And I hadn't found an animal communicator. I had just found things about dogs and dog communication. So I pressed that website. I was just enthralled, and I'm reading, and I was just like, oh my goodness, that's what happened to me last night. This is it. I didn't even know it was a thing, and it's a job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this women, this is a job. Oh my goodness. And I couldn't get enough. And then, and no disrespect whatsoever to your good self, Shannon, or your peers over on the other side of the States, but this was my honest response, reading down, and then I saw that she was in America, and I was like, oh, she's American. Oh, right. No wonder that'll never work here in the UK.
Yeah.
And the disappointment I felt, it was like, oh, it felt too far away, because it's like over here in the UK that, stiff upper lip, and, nobody will accept that here. Yeah, in America you will, but not here. And that deflation that I felt, but I saw that she offered workshops, and she was in England. I'm up in Scotland, but she was down in England that weekend. So I phoned up.
Well,
and the organizer said, well, I've got one place left. And I said, well, it's got my name on it. I'm meant to be there. And so that was that sequence of events. And although I'd never had anything to do with animals my whole life, I had another, I'll not go into the details, but I had another piece of synchronicity, and I ended up with a puppy. And again, it was just
wow.
Yeah, like if you'd said that this was going to happen, I would have said no. So that had happened maybe a couple of months beforehand. So in amongst all of this, I've got this little puppy that I was taking to puppy classes. And so I had puppy class that night. So I'd booked the workshop, and this had all happened the night before, Dan, the dog, coming to me, booked the workshop, and I had puppy class that night. So when we finished, I'd asked the dog his name, and said Dan. So I'm at the puppy class with my tiny little fluff ball of a border collie, black and white border collie.
A border collie, of course.
Of course. The only breed of dog that I actually knew. So
you knew.
So I'm at the puppy class, and lady, she's no longer with us, but she was, her usual obedient, attentive, dying to get on with itself, typical border collie. And I'm listening intently, perfectionist Sarah-Jane, want to get it right, want to be the best dog guardian that I possibly can be. So I'm listening attentively too. And the dog trainer, she was she had a huge heart. And what she wouldn't do for border collies was actually, not worth knowing. But she was quite Sergeant Major. She was and she dressed in green, and she looked very military, and it was like, so she's talking away, telling us what we needed to practice. And then she said, and it's very important that you get this technique with your dog, really, you'll get that on point. Because for an example, my dog Dan, and that was it, Shannon. I was like, oh my God, it's her dog. And I just knew.
My
I didn't
goodness.
even know she had a dog called Dan. I didn't even know any of her dogs. I'd only been to the class twice. So I'm sitting there thinking, I just knew. I just, everything in my body said it's her dog. And so I wasn't listening to the instructions anymore. I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to tell this Sergeant Major, no nonsense person that I've been talking to her dog that I've never seen and never met? How am I going to get over that? That's what was in my head. And I had to stand up and do the exercise. And of course, I didn't have a clue.
No idea.
Lady's looking at me as if to say, oh, you really let this sign down. You're not paying attention. So at the end of the class, she had her head down. She's getting all the new people in, the older dogs. And I was there. She didn't lift her head at all. And she was just like, yes. And I said, oh, I wonder if I could have some time to chat with you, if that's okay, outside of the class. And she didn't lift her head, and she said, okay, are you worried about Lady? Now, any normal, sensible person, Shannon, would have said, oh, yes. But no, not me. Not me. I just blurted it out and I said, no, actually, it's about Dan. But the next thing really surprised me, because in most circles, her expected response would be, why would you want to talk to me about Dan? You're a brand new dog guardian. You don't know anything about dogs. You don't even know my Dan. What would you want to speak to me about Dan for? But that's not what happened. She snapped her head up and she said, Dan. And I said, yes. And she said, I can meet you on Friday. And I said,
Oh,
I'll meet you on
wow.
Friday. And that was the start. That was the start of it. So yeah, a kind of unusual.
Incredible. I mean,
unusual
but
journey.
so inspiring. I mean, just so inspiring, and exactly the kind of experience that, I mean, maybe it was a shocker to you when it was happening back then, especially because there was no present life context for it.
No,
I
not at
too
all.
grew up with a terror of dogs after being bitten
Wow.
as a young girl, and had to work very hard to get over it. I've had to work, and what's important for people that are listening or watching to understand is that these kinds of incredible tales, and you can see, those of you who are watching can see my face, my expression is never heard this before in my life. And yet these kinds of experiences become more commonplace. They become the almost the expectation, definitely the norm rather than the exception, because the animals are our teachers and they choose whom they choose, and it makes
Yeah,
sense to
yeah,
them. It makes
yeah.
sense to them. It doesn't make sense to us. And a lot of that has to do with, not to insert a spoiler before the rest of your story, but the degree of openness that we
That is it.
present with. And when a person, for instance, is oblivious to animals or terrified of animals, or actively convinced that a military style of dog to owner obedience is the only path that's relevant. These tend to be the kinds of people that animals will seek out, because underneath that rigidity, there's a shock value
Yeah,
that can lead to almost an instantaneous openness. And it's almost like something so shocking that it literally kind of stops our mind. And we're just kind of looking around going, okay, did anybody else see the fireworks or watch the UFO, zipping through the air? No, it was just me. Okay, what do I do with this? Because it's so powerful and so meaningful. And I crave context, and I crave somebody to talk to about it. And I crave community. And, it's exactly what we were talking about when we opened this particular episode today. It's like there's a pathway into connection that sometimes we can only find when we realize we're not the only species on this planet with thoughts and feelings. And there's no judgment if we're not aware. A lot of this has to do with how we grew up, our early experiences, what was presented to us, maybe even what we have access to when we're growing up, versus the unfoldment of our the fullness of who we are, who we're meant to be. Maybe there's even a soul contract in place, who knows? But the animals know.
absolutely.
Right?
The
Sarah-Jane,
know,
the animals
always.
know, right? They
They
know before we know. There's so much to learn, and it's moving from a place of telling to asking, from knowing to questioning, from creating a kind of a survival skills checklist and following that to the letter, to going, well, what if I just try this? And, maybe a different pathway will open up. And I believe that's a lot of what, of course, I haven't had the privilege of studying with you personally, but as you know, I have a really good friend who studies with you. And I have heard such incredible and amazing life-changing things about the work that you do, and your mentoring and your coaching and your teaching and your energy work. And so look at that, Miss Sarah-Jane, so much brave, and look where it led. So tell us. So we're going to just, this podcast is really, and video blogcast is really, geared towards inviting you in. If you're listening or you're watching, inviting you into the conversation, inviting you into the experience, inviting you into a wider circle of friends, a deeper feeling of connection with this planet that we're all sharing, and all the beings that we share it with, and offering you the opportunity to find your tribe in all of its species, you know.
Absolutely, Shannon. And when you say that, it really resonates for me so deeply, because so many people, I have a free animal communication practice group on Facebook. So for those of you that are on Facebook, you're more than welcome to join. Just look up animal communication practice group, and I can't remember what image is on it. I think it's me speaking to a sheep, but I can't remember.
Fantastic.
But that, you'll find me there, and there's opportunities there for you to practice. We put an animal teacher comes in every week, and you've got 3 days to have a go. And you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to even have ever done it before, but you're more than welcome to join there. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because what you just said there, Shannon, is about finding that community. And the amount of time, certainly it doesn't surprise, it still touches me, but it doesn't surprise me anymore. But back in the day when we could do live workshops, in-person workshops, it feels so long ago now. It used to really, I used to find it so hard when participants would introduce themselves. You know, we'd go around and everybody would introduce themselves, and they would burst into tears at the isolation that they felt their whole lives, because nobody got their love of animals. Nobody understood why they were so upset about this happening to a neighbour's dog, or, you know, whatever the scenario was. And so to watch people, you know, adults, men and women, you know, just break down in that emotion and say, it's just so wonderful to be here in a room with other people that feel the way that I do, because my whole life nobody's ever understood this. So that sense of community and finding your tribe, it's really important. And the more safe spaces that you can find to be present in, the better. And that's probably one of my strongest drivers, creating that safe place, that place where people can show up as their true, authentic animal communicator self. Even if you don't think you're an animal communicator, you are. If I can do this, and this is the premise of my teaching. My background, as I said earlier, is in education, so my degree's in education. And so the transition into teaching animal communication was quite a natural one for me, because I love to teach. But I didn't plan to teach. Again, they were just opportunities and situations that came. I didn't plan to write a book. That landed in, well, I did plan to write a book, but I was going to do it when I retired and I had some time. But the opportunity came, I think 11 years ago now, and I wrote my book then. So these things have kind of come along, and as I say, I didn't necessarily plan to teach. But what I have discovered is the importance of not just creating that safe space, but creating the encouragement that's needed for people to feel brave enough to give it a go. Because my mantra behind everything that I teach is, if I can do this work, if I can do it, and yourself as well, Shannon, I didn't realize that you had a fear of dogs as well. So if you can do this work and I can do this work, coming from a place of, probably for you as well, quite debilitating fear and terror, and we can find a way to open our hearts to make that connection, then so can everybody that's listening to this. And I truly, 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 fundamentally believe that. The day I stop believing that is the day I'll stop teaching. I absolutely believe that part of my plan that I had no awareness of was that I was meant to teach this work, and I was meant to come from that place of fear. So I'm not saying to people, oh, you can do this. I've been doing it since I was nigh high, you know, I've been doing it since I was born. That's not my story. So if I can learn how to do this, then you can learn to do it as well. And I say that to everyone that's listening or watching here. We all have those innate abilities. We were born with them, and it's our God-given right to be able to access them and use them for the good of the animal world. And when I say the animal world, I mean, you know, all species. And we can include rocks and trees in there as well, because if you can talk to animals, you can talk to trees. do, and plants and all everything,
And
all life
most
forms.
importantly, each other. I mean, that's kind of, a hidden gem in the middle of it is remembering that we too are animals. Essentially, we
Yep.
have an animal body. We have, and this particular podcast and blogcast is not, geared around getting into the debate between, faith versus non-faith and science versus,
Not about that.
Eastern and
Connection.
Western. And I mean, because those extremes are always going to exist. It's about finding your place and what feels true for you, and recognizing that, I often ask myself when I'm really scared to do something, because like I'm turning 51 in, I don't know, a handful of days. And it's like, yeah, you're a little
So
late
am
to the party.
I.
Yay!
In fact, just at the beginning of the year. I'm at the beginning, 51 at the beginning of the
And I'm
year.
right at the end of the year. So, it's like, am I not a little late to the party to just, but that's when it woke up in me. That's when it happened.
Yeah.
And the thing is like at the end of the day, I say to myself, I mean, my father just passed earlier this year. We were really, really close. And my best friend just a handful of months before her, very unexpectedly. And it's awoken in me a real commitment to live while the living is good, live while I'm here, consider if there's something I'd like to try or experience, how disappointed am I going to be when I'm lying on my deathbed and I didn't do it? And that's really the question you have to ask. Is that more important than, for instance, the brave you showed when you shared with your now ex-partner, hey, I got something to tell you. It's like, there are people out there that we don't have to tiptoe around. And but first there's a necessary there's a commitment to saying yes to that. It's if we're waiting for confidence, as one of my business coaches like to say, if we're waiting for confidence, if we're waiting for surety,
We'll wait a long time.
Waiting. We'll be waiting. We'll be on our deathbed going, dang it, and it never came, But if we're willing to commit to just having an experience, then we open up a space for us to have that experience, whatever it may be. And then, 50 or 60 or 70 or 30 or 20 or however many years from now, when we are, preparing for our transition, we're not going to be laying there going, dang it, I didn't do it. Let's give it a try. You don't have to tell anybody else but yourself. But it is a birthright. I liken it. I often share that, it's like you're operating. It's part of your operating system. It's one of those cool, neat little gadgets in your applications folder that you didn't know was there. No, because nobody told you. Nobody told you. Nothing in our educational system, nothing in our, in a polite society,
doesn't
so to
really
speak.
Support. Society doesn't support or value those right brain tools and activities. We've moved away from that to scientifically based evidence, and conveniently chose to devalue all the inherent innate abilities that all our ancestors used before us. So you're absolutely right. And I love how you said about it's finding where you fit and how you fit. And so what I would like to add into that piece, Shannon, is, and this is coming from speaking to lots of students over the years. So when you feel like you don't fit, something's out of alignment. There's something not right in there. So when you're faced with these dreams and aspirations of what you want to do in the world, whether it's just animal communication or whether it's animal communication and this and this and this, say yes to yourself, because the only thing you've got to lose is finding out that that particular yes isn't what took you back into full alignment with yourself. And then you just discard that and you go on to the next yes. Because what I've discovered for my, I teach students, but I've got a flagship program for those that want to work professionally, and you can't buy that off the website. We have to have a conversation. I need to make sure it's the right and best fit for you, and also for me as well. And if it's not the right fit for somebody, I'll always say to them, look, I don't think this is best program. You might prefer this program of mine, or you might prefer this program run by somebody else because that fits what you're looking for. So that's the kind of conversation that we have. But what I have heard consistently over the years is the amount of longing and yearning and just feeling like they haven't found their place in the world. And it's because they haven't said yes thus far to opening up their heart to animal communication. And I'm feeling really emotional again. I've had experiences of students that have had long-term health conditions, a range of different things that have all quite miraculously
Those are the best kind of miracles, aren't they?
Just not come back when they've started animal communication, because they're then back on track with their soul's purpose and in alignment and in a full alignment with where they're meant to be. So say yes. What's the worst that can happen? It's not for you.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, maybe just saying yes is the point. And maybe the thing doesn't matter as much. It may be a stepping. I have another really, really dear friend who we became Reiki masters together, and she's unfolding her gifts in this and that and the other direction. And she's just fascinated with just a whole wealth of different teachers and programs and experiences. And it's like, occasionally she'll get frustrated and she'll be like, dang it, I thought this was it and it's not it. But it's like, let's follow the flow of the energy. Let's keep following the flow of the energy. Let's just see where it leads. Let's go have an adventure, because a lot of life, and especially over the last couple of years, has felt very like not the kind of adventure we want to be having, and very restrictive and very fearful and very isolating. And this is the time when I'll just come right out and say, I love social media. I love Facebook, because when I open my social media, because of how I've curated my feeds and my communities, I've literally gotten to pick my friends. I've gotten to pick my communities, so they can go. Say the name of your group again. They're your Facebook
Animal
group?
Communication Practice Group.
So Animal Communication Practice Group. That could be the first thing you see when you open your Facebook feed from now on. Wouldn't that be cool? You could go and and you come to Animal Love Languages on Facebook, and you'll find Sarah-Jane's podcast and all the other wonderful podcasts, and so many brave and inspiring stories. So many people that you'll be thinking about in the back of your mind when you're wrestling with yourself, when your rational brain is going, no, don't try that course. You'll die. That's your survival brain that can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and an animal communication intro course. So let's, put it in context and realize, yes, you really can. And it may be that it's just saying yes, that is the whole point of it all, is just giving yourself an opportunity.
We're meant to enjoy our lives.
Oh, I mean, so much so.
On this earth to find joy. And sometimes we have experiences that are not joyful. And I know that you mentioned when you were speaking a few moments ago, Shannon, that you recently lost a friend and your father. So my condolences for that. Experiences like that, well, they're hard, or they can be hard. And life isn't always, a bucket full of roses, but it's how we traverse that. And I am a great believer, and this is based purely on my own personal experience. And Shannon, you've so beautifully said on a few occasions now, my brave choices and decisions at the beginning, but I've had a lot of brown trouser moments in the last 20 years. A lot.
Now that is a phrase I haven't heard before.
Right. Brown so I thought it was a bit more polite than saying that, like kind of.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So I thought it was a bit politer.
Very
we use that in our team. We use that in our team because I've now got graduates that have come through my program like years ago that enjoy working with me, wanted to do more, so they've come back and retrained as coaches. So when the coaches are facing new fears, like going live to run a training class, that's a big deal if you've never done it before. And so it's like, it's okay to have, I always say, it's okay to have a brown trouser moment. That's okay. Just do it, see what happens. So I've had a lot of brown trouser moments, writing a book, running my first workshop, doing an online course, and then up leveling to professional levels. All of those were big milestones and scary ones. So in response to what you're saying about saying yes, and again, this is for everyone that's listening or watching, and some of you might know this, but for those of you that haven't had the opportunity yet to practice much with saying yes, I absolutely promise you, based on my own experience and based on those that I mentor, the more you practice it saying yes, the easier it gets. And you'll find that the great big things, when you say yes to them, there still might be fear there, and that's okay. The great big things, you'll have less fear response to that than what you had to the earlier yes situations that you welcomed into your life. So it does get easier. And the other thing that I wanted to say, Shannon, I love how you said about the animal communication capabilities, you know, these innate qualities that we're all born with, that they're in the applications folder and we don't know where that is. So I use you've brought that right up to kind of 21st century. I'm still in the old game, and I'm
No, I think
muscle.
it's well, no, it's absolutely, I mean, it's absolutely, but it's just like,
that.
okay,
I still talk about
yeah,
videos.
yeah.
Still
Well,
talk about
I know.
videos.
Well,
I'm
don't
doing
even, I mean,
training because it's so, you know, you've been doing the same stuff for such a long time. Often say they'll maybe show you a video and it's like, oh, DVD, I must remember to
I know,
upgrade.
is that even a thing anymore? Because now that we have
Exactly.
Blu-ray, and now we have streaming, and I don't even
exactly.
get. I mean, it's like there's only so much
that.
technology a person can encode in, right?
Absolutely. But whatever you want to call it, it's the same thing as saying yes. It's that muscle. And so your animal communication skill is like that muscle. If it's never been used, it's going to be tired. It's going to be, you know, unfit. It's not going to be strong. So the more you practice, or even the more you open to even the idea of practicing, then the more you can build that muscle. And then with more practice, you can start to really hone it. And then with guidance and mentorship and support, you can sculpt it. So just see it like going to the gym.
Seriously.
You might go a bit unfit, you know, a bit flabby, unfit, undefined, put some practice in, you kind of shape up a little bit, you get stronger. And then when you're ready and you're ready to take it to the next level, which is the equivalent of working with you know, under somebody's direct mentorship, that's when you're sculpting. And that's all it is. It's the say yes, welcoming the yes, use the yes muscle, use the animal communication muscle.
And consider, you know, when was the last time that, of course, we haven't had it for probably a year and a half now, but when was the last time that you were at a party and there was somebody who really, really, really wanted to talk to you? They really wanted to talk to you and you just couldn't get away from them. We've all had these experiences, right? And just consider when you are first, you know, just opening up to the possibility that maybe your dog has been talking to you already, and maybe that's why this topic is. I mean, there's a reason why you're listening to Let's Talk to Animals instead of, you know, Blast the Fat or, you know, 4-Day Work Week or whatever. There's a million podcasts out there, right? So there's a reason you're listening to this one. But just consider that the animal in question really wants to talk to you. And so they're going to meet you more than halfway.
Yeah.
You know, and what I like to share, I know, Sarah-Jane, we first of all, I didn't do this at the beginning, and I meant to, and I told you I would, and I forgot. So I'm going to say your website now, Sarah, and it's SARAH dash Jane, JANE, Pet Whisperer, and that's all, that part of Jane Pet Whisperer is all one word, .com. And really write this down. I'll put it in the show notes too, because it's not as easy to find you. You know, it's like it's a longer website name, and I've had to, you know, it's just, I was like, I really need to just write this down and make sure that I say it properly.
Thank you for that feedback, because I'm redoing the website. It's old now.
Good.
It's about 10 years old, 13 years old. So I'm
Okay,
redoing it, and I'll bear that in mind, and I'll get a shorter handle.
A shorter handle, but, and you know, it's just, it's, so you know, I'll put it in the show notes, but, the other thing I want to share as well, you know, you've got a ton of free tools, some of which I just found this morning. I was like, how did I not already sign up for this? And also, I want to encourage you to go to animallovelanguages.com. One of the easiest, quickest ways to kind of get, you know, in your story, Sarah-Jane, you were talking about, you know, it wasn't necessarily like a back and forth conversation, like he said this, and then I said that, and then he said this, and then I said that. You know, you mentioned having feelings in your body and emotions and thoughts and things like that. And so head over to right next to the podcast link where you can find Sarah-Jane's podcast. You'll see a little link on animallovelanguages.com that says free tools. Scroll down a little bit, you'll see something that says Animal Communication Camp. It's a 5-day, 10 minutes a day. Learn 5 of the main ways that animals communicate with their people. And it's very easy, and you can practice with your own pet. So that's a great way to get started. And then I'm going to assume that in your book, Sarah-Jane, that you share even more about how the story, because we still kind of have a cliffhanger with Dan and his person. And so,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so there's lots. So, if you're still hanging on going, when am I going to find out what happened with Dan and the conversation on Friday? Go to the book, right? Go to Sarah-Jane-petwhisperer.com. You can get the book. Go to the Facebook group. You know how to find both of us on Facebook. This is an easy way to start connecting in and just see how it feels. Again, it's like you're not making a decision here. You're committing to saying yes to seeing how it feels. And if that sounds, a little airy fairy to you, it's like you're just like, you know what, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to see how it feels. I'm going to go over, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what kinds of conversations are happening over there. I'm going to see how it feels when I open up my social feeds. And instead of seeing, doom and gloom political or whatever it is that you've been dreading, you see pictures of cute puppies and parrots and turtles and people talking about them. And if that feels good to you, maybe you'll want to spend 15 minutes there. Maybe you'll want to spend 15 minutes a day. Maybe you'll want to download a few of these free tools and check them out. Maybe you'll just add it in as something fun that's just for you, that you don't even have to tell anybody in your regular daily life about, because it's your little thing, that it's your little treasure that you just get to play with for a while. And then, there's a whole wide world out there. There's a whole wide world. There's lots of amazing people, and there's lots of amazing programs, and there's lots of living to do and lots of exploring. And one of my favorite teachers, she's actually probably the Sonia Choquette. I adore her, and working with her actually kicked off this whole process in me. And this is not a podcast about me, so we won't go into that. But she often says, actually it was her mother who recently passed who always said this: don't assume you know anybody, including yourself. And that might be a good place to conclude today's podcast. Sarah-Jane, thank you again for making the time, because you have
you're so welcome.
Talk about somebody that has now a global community of folks, both in your home area in Fife, in Scotland, in the UK, and also in America. Hello. And around the world.
Who would have thought 20 years ago?
You found your people all over the world,
When I looked at Amelia's website and said, she would need to be American, wouldn't she? And here I am. I've had the privilege of teaching in New York for the last few years up until lockdown. So very blessed. And I know we're rounding up. Something that's really important for me as a teacher and a mentor, when Shannon was saying about, there's a whole load of people out there, and check them out. I think it's really important, if, as she said, play with it, see how it feels. And if what Shannon has written or you hear on her podcast and what you're seeing on the website, what's on my website, if it resonates, then we're in your tribe already. But equally, if you look at my website, or you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, I can't stand that Scottish accent, or I hate the way she waves her hands about when she's speaking, then I'm probably not your best teacher. And that's okay. What my invitation to you is go out and have a look. Because if you're ready to say yes, you want to make sure that you are working with somebody that gets you, that you feel connected with, that you like, and you are ready to open yourself up in that sometimes vulnerable way to step into this newness of animal communication. And even if you're not new to animal communication, if you're ready to step up, then there's those brown trouser moments. So you want to really be sure that the person that you're working with or taking your work further with, that you're a good fit. So go check out the group, and I do a live training in there every week, every Thursday. It's just really short, kind of 10-20 minutes, just some input on animal communication, and it's free. And you've got all the backlog of videos in there as well. So there's lots of free stuff. I'd love to see you there if it feels right for you.
Exactly. And also, just as a final note, and I try to say this in every single episode, is if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really late to the party, where there's so many, the work's all been done. It's like, no, it hasn't. Think about how many animals there are in this world.
Absolutely.
Just think about, and we're not even just talking cats and dogs. We're talking parrots, we're talking turtles, we're talking, And whatever your personal passion is, there are more than enough animals in this world. If you feel even any inkling to get involved, to dive in and experience this for whatever your reason, whether you want to make a difference in shelters where you volunteer, whether you just want to have more interspecies family harmony, whether you want to proceed and maybe start working professionally and hang out a shingle or whatever you like to call it. If you are feeling curious, there's something for you there. And
Absolutely.
if you don't find the right fit the first time with the teacher, consider there are so many teachers out there too. And I've studied with several teachers now, and I've absolutely gained priceless experiences from each and every one. And the podcast here is all about, let's connect us all together, because it's like, it's just one step to the left or right. We're all doing different work. It's what I like. In India, I learned a parable many years ago when I was living there, and it's called the Lord's Club. And these and I'll just keep it very short. These lords got together, and they wanted to form a club so they could have a social time every month. So the first time they all got together, and there was nobody turned the lights on. There was no air conditioning. There was no food. The trash was overflowing because they all showed up as lords. Right. So they're all going to have a staff, right, to do all this stuff. And they were like, this is never going to work. This isn't even any fun. So they all decided that every month they would pick a job. And 1 month somebody would be the president, and 1 month somebody would be the janitor. And they just rotated roles. And so if you start to think about our community this way, you start to realize it doesn't really matter what our title is. It doesn't really matter how long we've been doing it. It doesn't really matter how we teach or how we learn. We're all needed. And so welcome to the party. Welcome to the Lord's Club. Welcome to Let's Talk to Animals. Welcome to our world and your world. We're excited to get to know you. Please share comments, questions, ideas for future podcast episodes. And most importantly, tell us about your interspecies family. We love to hear, and how we can help, and how we can learn from each other. So Sarah-Jane LeBlanc, an incredible privilege and a joy to spend the last 40 minutes with you. Sarah-JanePetWhisperer.com. You can find myself, and more importantly, Pearl, Malty, and Bruce, my interspecies flock, and Flash Gordon, of course, our dachshund, at animallovelanguages.com. Absolutely a joy to meet you, and thank you for sharing a little bit of your day with us. So bye for now.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Okay, bye for now.